So now that brings us to some handy-dandy scenarios, right? We're going to go over some really common problems that we have, and let's just see what some of the possibilities are. So just so I can set the ground rules for these scenarios, if you're watching this here on the video, which obviously you are, the way that this is going to work is I'm going to provide a problem, and then I'm going to provide 3 possible solutions. Now, all 3 of these solutions are actually good solutions, but I want you to remember some of the rules and the philosophies that we talked about going in here, and see what order you should go through, and then I'll reveal the answer. I certainly hope that before you guys go to the answer that if you need to, you'll pause the video and really contemplate, think, if I was here, if I was in this situation, what should I do? And then check out the answers. So we've got 6 scenarios. Let's start with the first one. The vocalist you're trying to dial in sounds muddy. What should you do? Option A, remove the offending frequency. Option B, tell the vocalist to not stand so close to the microphone. Option C, add more top end to increase clarity. Take a second, see what you come up with. Now that you've unpaused the video, the answers are B, A, then C, right? Sticking with that original principle, we said fix it at the mix first, right? So having the vocalist not stand so close to the microphone, that'll get rid of some of the low-end frequency bunch. It's called the proximity effect. I'm not going to go into detail about it, but if you look it up online, you'll find the answer to what this one is pretty quickly. Then after that, we go to option A, remove the offending frequency, right? We get rid of, we subtract before we add. And then if that doesn't solve our problem, then we can follow it up by adding more top end in order to increase the clarity of the vocals. All right. Scenario number 2. One of the musicians on stage is very quiet. You notice the input meter is very low on the board compared to everyone else. How do you want to handle it? Option A, increase the gain on the board. Option B, push the fader up higher. Option C, ask the musician if they have more volume. Take a second, think about it. Now that we've unpaused, let's come up with our answers. The answer is C, then A, then B. First, ask the musician if they have more volume, right? Going ahead, fixing it at the source. Then, option A, increase the gain on the board. You remember when we talked back to in section number 2, we said that the gain was the first section before everything else. We have to get the gain right first, and then finally we can move to the fader, right? So C, then A, then B. Scenario number 3. Every time the guitar player goes from clean to distorted, you notice a significant change in volume. What should you do? A, ask the guitar player to change the levels on his pedals. B, move the fader when he changes settings. C, add compression so the volume changes aren't that noticeable. A, then B, then C in this particular scenario. Obviously, again, option A, fixing it at the source, our best option. If there's a huge dramatic change in volume, you got to make sure that they're not, they fix it, right? Then if they fix it, makes your life a lot easier. The reason we pick option B over option C in this case is, especially when it comes to guitar, especially electric guitar, does not like compression. That's not a tool that we use. Distortion is actually a form of compression, and so compressing the instrument even more is usually a recipe for disaster. So in this case, option B, just simply moving the fader, is one of our better options. Option C, it can work, but I wouldn't recommend it. I would definitely explore the first 2 options first. Scenario number 4. The low end of the mix is very muddy. You notice the keyboard player is playing as low, if not lower, than the bass player is. You will go through the following options. Option A, roll off some of the low end on the EQ. B, ask the keyboard player not to play so low. C, ask the keyboard player if they have a brighter patch. Take a second. Here comes the answers. B, then C, then A. So obviously, if they're playing way too low, just ask them, hey, can you not play so low? This is really common. Keyboard players, I'm going to pick on you for just a second, all right? But it's all in good jest. Keyboard players, you guys have a tendency to play with both hands, which is probably how you guys were taught, and I totally get that. But really, realistically, we've got a lot of people who fill up the band, all right? And it's important that you leave room for everybody. I have to do the same thing as a guitar player, too. I can't just play big open chords all the time. And so I have to learn how to, play higher up the neck, play smaller chords, smaller patterns, triads, things like that. And so, yeah, fixing it at the source, definitely the better solution. Option C is also a good one. This is also still a fixing it at the source type of deal. Asking the keyboard player if they have brighter patches, right? Especially in, big environments like this. Having brighter patches is really a good option. And then finally, option A is another one. We can roll off some of the low end on the EQ. You can even go as far as using a high pass filter to roll off some of that. Both are, that's also a good option if worse comes to worse. Scenario number 5, we actually had this exact scenario happen not that long ago, and ask Pastor Nate about it because he totally picked the right answer. It's awesome. The pastor's mic keeps popping every time he uses heavy consonants like P's and B's, and it's becoming very distracting. What should you do? A, move the headset so the capsule isn't directly in front of their mouth. B, add some compression so the pops aren't as noticeable. C, use a low-pass filter to remove the unwanted pops. Answer coming in 3, 2, 1. The answer is A, then C, then B. So fixing it at the source, move the headset so the capsule isn't directly in front of their mouth. Pastor Nate did exactly this just a few weeks ago, and I'm so proud of him for it. That's a really common thing, too, especially if you get a speaker who is not used to wearing a headset. Their headset should be put somewhere directly, like I'd say in the middle, on the side here. You want the capsule to be outside of the range of their mouth, but still, if you get too high, it gets really nasally. If you go too low, it's too muddy. Keep it right here, just beyond the corner of their mouth. For me, it's like right on the edge of my goatee, my beard here. So then option C, use a low-pass filter to remove unwanted pops. Things like B's and P's are usually low end coming through quite a bit, so using the low pass filter, making sure that's set properly, will usually help alleviate some of that. You'll still hear it, obviously, but it'll be less distracting. And you can also, then option B is using compression to make sure the pops aren't as noticeable. If you know how to use compression right, this can be a great tool. But again, still the big warning sign from before. If you don't know how to use the compression, don't worry about it. All right, last scenario. The acoustic guitar has this honky mid-range tone, and you aren't getting a lot of high end. What do you want to do? Option A, remove the offending frequency from the EQ. Option B, check the EQ on their acoustic guitar / DI box. Option C, check how long it's been since they changed strings. Answer in 3, 2, 1. C, then B, then A. All right. Now, I realize that C is not always practical because you might figure this out, and it turns out they only have like a half hour to practice, and they're not going to take that whole half hour to just change strings so their acoustic guitar sounds good. But maybe if you catch it early enough, or acoustic guitar players, if you're conscious of it, right, make sure you change your strings frequently because a lot of times in a larger band, especially once the band gets going, the only thing you're going to hear of your acoustic guitar is the strumminess of your strings. And if you have old, dull strings, you're going to basically get completely blanketed in the mix, or you're going to get turned up so loud that all you hear is the acoustic guitar. And again, we're trying to create that balance. So just understand that a lot of what you bring to the table is that strumminess, right? Then finally, option B, check the EQ on their acoustic guitar and their DI box. If you change the EQ on the box, that fixes you from having to deal with the EQ on your end. And then finally, remove the offending frequencies from the EQ. So I hope that we spent a good amount of time going over some common scenarios here. I'd encourage all of you musicians, to understand like what your role is in the EQ. Make sure that you understand your instrument as much as possible and that you're really squeezing the most out of it. Sound engineers, I hope you take a lot of these principles to heart. Okay, there's some really basic guidelines, and I do say that they're guidelines because there is no hard rule, but these basic guidelines will get you through a lot of troubleshooting scenarios really quickly, and they'll become natural as you practice them more and more.